it's fair to say that most Hollywood movies follow a pretty standard structure. The hero faces a problem, they venture off on a quest to fix said problem, they battle the villain, and triumph. The end. But of course, not every film dares to follow quite that precise formula, and sometimes we'll roll credits with the antagonist coming out on top. So with that in mind, here with movies where evil won. Drag Me to Hell. Let's kick things off with a movie featuring literal supernatural evil in Sam Raimi's masterful 2009 horror comedy Drag Me to Hell. The plot revolves around bank loan officer Christine, who denies a loan to a European gypsy woman who in turn places a curse on Christine's jacket button. Over the days that follow, Christine is tormented by a demonic entity which plans to drag Christine to hell after subjecting her to 3 days of torture. After making numerous attempts to shift the curse, including sacrificing her dear cat, she believes she's finally passed it on by burying the cursed button with the corpse of the recently deceased gypsy woman. But as Christine meets her boyfriend Clay at a train station in the film's final scene, he reveals that she buried the wrong envelope, at which point demonic hands emerge beneath the train tracks and yes, drag her straight to hell as Clay watches on in disbelief. It's Terminator 3: Rise of the Machines. Can artificial intelligence be evil? Well, that's a question posited by so much contemporary science fiction, and if you've seen the first 2 Terminator movies, which let's be honest you surely have, then the answer seems pretty damn obvious. But after T2 delivered audiences an uplifting and optimistic finale, where Judgment Day was averted and humanity was left to make of their future whatever they saw fit, the belated threequel swiftly decided to undo all of that. Easily the best part of an otherwise standard-issue sequel, T3's climax reveals that John Connor and Catherine Brewster were never supposed to stop Judgment Day, but simply survive it. In one of the all-time bleakest endings to a $180 million blockbuster, billions of lives are wiped out as Skynet launches an awesomely destructive nuclear holocaust on Earth. Connor and the other survivors are then presumably left to fend for themselves in a post-apocalyptic wasteland while Skynet flourishes. As much as it flies in the face of T2's ending, as a commentary on the inevitability of humanity effectively plotting its own demise, it's really quite ballsy and brilliant.
Gone Girl. David Fincher's deliciously slippery thriller Gone Girl is centered around the disappearance of Amy Dunn, and the consequent suspicion cast upon her dubiously moral husband, Nick. Midway through the movie, however, we learn that not only is Amy alive, but she staged her own disappearance and falsified evidence to frame him for her murder as revenge for him having an affair. But Amy ultimately decides to reintegrate herself into Nick's life, staging another story in which she was kidnapped by an obsessive ex-boyfriend, Desi, and killed him in self-defense. In reality, she willingly shacked up with him and murdered him during sex. And so, Amy returns home to a baffled Nick, as the abduction case is closed by the FBI. Nick plans to expose Amy's heinous scheme on live television, only for Amy to reveal that she's impregnated herself with his sperm from a fertility clinic. An irate Nick feels obliged to remain with Amy for the sake of his child, and so keeps up the lie that he and Amy are happily reconciled with a baby on the way. But there is no denying that Amy came out with the big fat W in the end. Is this the greatest of David Fincher's pictures? Well, if it's not, then you let me know what is in the comments section down below. Brightburn. The subversive superhero flick Brightburn provided a grim answer to the question, what if Superman was a murderous a-hole? The film follows the basic origin story beats expected of the Man of Steel, as infant child Brandon crashes to Earth and is adopted by a kindly couple. But it becomes increasingly clear throughout the movie that Brandon is being groomed for evil by a mysterious force calling out to him from his spaceship, leading to him turning full villain in the third act. Yet rather than have Brandon be slain by his own distraught parents in a tragic finale, Brightburn goes in the total opposite direction. Brandon burns a hole through his father's head and drops his mother to her death from a great height. Worse still, he causes a plane crash which kills everyone on board in the film's final scene, and the end credits then reveal that he embarks on a worldwide rampage, while the existence of other similarly superpowered folk is noted. With the implication that an evil Justice League is about to tear the world asunder, it's safe to say that humanity is basically screwed. Given that a Brightburn sequel is not looking likely, that's probably the end of the story, isn't it? And what a bleak ending it is.
No Country for Old Men. Much has been written about Anton Chigurh, the antagonist of the Coen brothers' Best Picture-winning Western, with many noting him to represent both the unstoppable evil trope recurrent in author Cormac McCarthy's novels, and also the inevitability of both violence and death. Chigurh's mission throughout the movie is to recover a satchel of money from a drug deal gone wrong, sending him on a collision course with the film's protagonists. Some may argue that Chigurh's methods, whereby he decides the fate of anyone he crosses with a coin flip, are too random to be evil, but McCarthy and the Coens seem to ultimately leave it up to the audience to decide. After all, the coin isn't killing anyone by itself. The film ends with Moss dead and the implication that Chigurh escaped with the money, while a defeated Bell is simply left to his own devices. Chigurh is involved in a nasty car accident before he leaves town, but it's quite clear that he makes a clean-ish getaway regardless.
Natural Born Killers. Natural Born Killers' mass-murdering protagonists, Mickey and Mallory Knox, certainly didn't have the most fortuitous start in life. But even so, their spree of murder and even worse throughout the film is borderline demonic. And given its clear inspiration from Bonnie and Clyde, it was a reasonable expectation that Oliver Stone would end his dizzying ultra-violent satire with the lovers being blown away by the cops. But Stone decided instead to have Mickey and Mallory inexplicably live to kill another day. In the final scene, they murder journalist Wayne Gale on live television and escape to parts unknown. In the end credits, we see Mickey and Mallory living as fugitives in an RV with their 2 children. It's basically the most unexpected ending imaginable, as though Stone felt compelled to flip the bird at the audience, expecting or even hoping to see the duo splattered across the screen by film's end. Fun fact though, Stone's original ending indeed saw Mickey and Mallory shot to death. Not by the police, but a fellow prison inmate who helps them escape. Alien 3. Though the first 2 Alien films categorically end with Ripley vanquishing the Xenomorph and getting to take a much-needed space nap, Alien 3 had far more final plans in store for the genre icon. It's revealed later in the threequel that Ripley was impregnated by a facehugger after her escape pod crashed, and as such she's carrying a Xenomorph queen embryo. Though villainous conglomerate Weyland-Yutani suggests she undergoes surgery to have the embryo removed, Ripley's well aware that they'll simply use it for nefarious purposes. And so, at the end of the film, she commits suicide by jumping into a furnace, seemingly destroying both herself and the embryo. While this might seem like a victory for humanity and a loss for Weyland-Yutani, the sequel, Alien Resurrection, sees Ripley cloned 200 years later using blood taken before her suicide. In a credibility-snapping twist, it's also revealed that Ripley's DNA was altered by gestating the Queen, resulting in each successful clone also growing up with an embryo inside it. So basically then, Ripley's efforts were ultimately for nothing here, as the Xenomorph still wound up in the hands of unscrupulous scientists with anything but humanitarian endeavors on their mind. Rosemary's Baby. Rosemary's Baby boasts one of the most haunting endings in cinema history, horror or otherwise. When Rosemary believes her baby has been stillborn, only to soon learn that her newborn is indeed alive and now in the care of the various Coven members. Rosemary approaches her baby and soon discovers that he is the son of Satan, confirming Rosemary's rape dream earlier in the film to be very, very real. And to make it all even worse, her husband Guy has been in league with the Coven the entire time. Upon the urging of the collective, Rosemary ultimately tends to her child when he cries. A devastating submission to the Coven. Their will done with Rosemary utterly powerless to do anything to change her circumstances. There's no grandstanding hero ending here where Rosemary liberates herself and her child. Just the very clear suggestion that the Coven's plan went off without a hitch. Invasion of the Body Snatchers, 1978. There are few more memorable instances of the villain winning in cinema than in the chilling conclusion to 1978's superb remake of Invasion of the Body Snatchers. While the original 1956 film ended on a more hopeful note that humanity was set to prevail over the pods, an extraterrestrial force seeking to covertly assimilate humanity a person at a time, the remake wraps up with a shockingly bleak mic drop of an ending. The film's chilling final scene focuses on two of the city's few remaining survivors, protagonist Matthew and his friend Nancy, as they secretly meet up. But a moment later, Matthew raises his finger to Nancy and opens his mouth wide, letting out an inhuman shriek, revealing himself to have been turned into a pod also. What an iconic image. The clear implication is that Nancy too will be captured and replaced. And given that one of the film's final sights is a glimpse of the pods preparing to move their operation to neighboring West Coast cities, it's pretty clear that humanity is done. Sticklers might argue that there's a creepy banality about the pods' actions which transcends mere evil, but given their industrious attempts to wipe out humanity, it's tough to see them as anything but, really.
Avengers Infinity War. Yes, there are those who half-jokingly believe that intergalactic terrorist Thanos did nothing wrong by, murdering half of the universe by the end of Infinity War. But come on, he's about as evil as they come. Skynet may have obliterated a decent chunk of the human race at the end of Terminator 3, but that's child's play compared to what Thanos did. With the snap of his Infinity Gauntlet, he wiped out half of all life in the universe. Except for all the plants and trees and stuff. Plants really got off lightly here, didn't they? Thanos' intentions may be for the best in his own sick mind, but since when isn't an unprecedented level of genocide about as evil as it gets? And although he does reveal to a young Gamora at the end that it cost him everything to do, it's undoubtable that Thanos is the real winner at the end of Infinity War.
Fallen. The ludicrously underrated supernatural horror Fallen does a fantastic job of making you dead certain that the hero's gonna prevail, only to pull the rug out at the last possible moment. The film opens with a glimpse of its ending, as protagonist Detective John Hobbs explains via voiceover that he's gonna tell us about the time he almost died, as he collapses to the floor in a snowy forest. Hobbs spends the rest of the story hunting down a serial killer who is in fact a fallen angel, Azazel, who can possess people simply by touching them, and at film's end, Hobbs kills Azazel's host, Jonesy, before poisoning himself, in turn leaving Azazel stranded in the middle of nowhere without a possible new host. Except before Hobbs dies, Azazel possesses him just as we resume the scene from the start of the film, confirming that the voiceover was actually Azazel all along talking about the time he almost died rather than Hobbs. At that moment, Azazel is saved from being confined to Hobbs' corpse forevermore by a cat, which arrives on the scene out of nowhere, allowing Azazel to possess it and then presumably find a new host as soon as another human being makes contact with him. Damn. Cheers for checking out this video today, folks. Now go and hit that subscribe button down below for more of this Whatculture stuff in your life. The Empire Strikes Back. The greatest Star Wars movie to date is also by far the grimmest, no matter that it was only the middle entry into a trilogy, which of course ultimately ended on a happy note for the heroes. But The Empire Strikes Back is nevertheless notable for handing a decisive, if temporary, W to the bad guys, given that it ends with Darth Vader chopping Luke Skywalker's hand off before announcing his parentage, while Princess Leia is forced to watch as Han Solo is captured and frozen in carbonite. Despite clearly setting up a third film to restore the balance, Empire nevertheless saw the heroes physically and psychologically broken in the most intimate and intrusive of ways. There's a reason why it remains the blueprint for franchise cinema's dark middle movie, because the victory of the villains is so deeply felt here, and fans had to wait a whole 3 years to see it finally resolved. Imagine if Marvel did that with Avengers Infinity War. I'd have lost my mind. If you're enjoying this Whatculture list today, my friend, then tap that subscribe button for even more of these interesting videos in your life.
Final Destination. The Final Destination franchise brings with it one hell of a narrative hook. The series' poor saps typically avoid a cataclysmic event after one of their group has a deathly premonition, prompting death to continually return to the lucky survivors, attempting to off them for good by not so subtly influencing the world around them. Now, perhaps if death was just killing the survivors in their sleep, you could argue that the unseen force was simply rebalancing the cosmic scales and keeping the world's population in check. But the needlessly cruel, violent, and often darkly comic manner in which the human meat shields are dismantled ultimately says otherwise. In these movies, death is a kid putting an insect under a magnifying glass on a hot summer's day. It knows exactly what it's doing and has not a single care for the suffering inflicted. Every single movie ultimately concludes with a final gotcha death, confirming death's dominance over all. Dying isn't inherently an evil or bad thing, it's the most natural thing in the world, but as a sentient, discriminating force, the death depicted in these movies clearly has one hell of a sixth sense of humour.
Arlington Road. Arlington Road's brutal ending takes no prisoners at all, that's for sure. The film focuses on college professor Michael Faraday, who suspects that his neighbours Oliver and Cheryl Lang are terrorists. Faraday turns out to be correct in the end, but here comes the nasty sting in the story's tale. In his attempt to stop the Langs from bombing the FBI headquarters, he's tricked into driving a car into the HQ containing the bomb itself. It detonates, killing Faraday and countless others inside the building, before a closing news broadcast reveals that Faraday was implicated for the crime in revenge for his FBI agent wife dying in the line of duty. Basically, the Langs perfectly framed Faraday for their own act, leaving Faraday's son Grant orphaned and believing his father to be a terrorist. All while the Langs move to another suburb and start their whole vile cycle again. Watchmen. Watchmen is an especially interesting example of this trope, because it's not so much about an evil force doing an evil thing for a selfish or destructive reason, but a more ambiguous character doing an undeniably evil act for the apparent greater good. The greater good. We're talking, of course, about Adrian Veidt, aka Ozymandias, who, in order to prevent a probable nuclear war between the US and the Soviet Union, frames Dr. Manhattan for a series of energy reactor explosions worldwide. These explosions kill millions, but also unite the US and Soviet Union against Manhattan, in turn preventing a nuclear war and theoretically saving billions of lives. And in order to further secure the secret of Veidt's deception and prevent World War III from taking place, an infuriated Rorschach is subsequently destroyed by Manhattan. It's a brilliant and provocative dilemma of Veidt executing a necessary evil for the greater good, as disgusting as it might seem to conventional morality. Even if Rorschach's tell-all journal does indeed get published and reveal the truth as the film's ending hints at, it's clear either way that evil prevails, whether it's Veidt's plan or warmongers annihilating each other with nukes.
Chinatown. And now we pivot back to a far more tangible and real evil in Roman Polanski's masterful 1974 film noir, Chinatown. In one of the all-time best downer endings in cinema history, protagonist Jake's plan to get Evelyn and her daughter/sister Catherine safely away from their rapist father/grandfather Noah goes horribly wrong. As Noah attempts to take custody of young Catherine, Evelyn shoots him and drives away, at which point the police shoot Evelyn, killing her. A distraught Catherine is then taken away by Noah, presumably free to be abused by him forevermore, while Jake is powerless to intervene and effectively told to just move on. It's a great film, but that ending is devastating.
The Last Seduction. The Last Seduction is a criminally underseen neo-noir from 1994. And one which surely would have scored Linda Fiorentino an Oscar nomination had it not been foolishly aired on HBO prior to its theatrical release. Fiorentino stars as Bridget Gregory, an all-timer femme fatale with an almost preternatural ability for wrapping men around her little finger. After fleeing with $700,000 from her abusive husband Clay, she shacks up with a divorced man, Mike, and as he falls for her, manipulates him into going to kill Clay. The plan goes awry though, so Bridget kills Clay herself, and then persuades Mike to have rough sex with her, before convincing him to take part in roleplay where he confesses to killing Clay himself. Little does Mike know that Bridget called the cops prior to this, resulting in him being arrested for rape and murder, allowing Bridget to get away with both Clay's money and his life insurance policy, seemingly leaving her well minted for the rest of her days. Cube. Cult classic sci-fi Cube follows a group of people who wake up within an interlocking series of cubes, most of which contain deadly traps designed to kill them. It's a terrifically taut and ambiguous piece of low-budget genre filmmaking, and ends with only one of the 7 characters making it out of the cube alive, Kazan. But the grimly amusing irony of the film's ending is that Kazan lacks the means to verbalize the insanity he's just experienced. I mean, that's even assuming Kazan truly does survive, of course, given that the straight-to-video sequel, Cube 2 Hypercube, seems to imply with its downer ending that those who escape are shot immediately after exiting by the shadowy organization behind the cubes.
The Vanishing. If you haven't seen this incredible 1988 Dutch thriller about a man desperately searching for his missing girlfriend, you absolutely need to change that. Like right now. After Saskia disappears at a service station, her boyfriend Rex spends the rest of the movie unable to move on even as the years pass by. As is uncommon for the genre, the film doesn't try to shield the audience from its antagonist, instead depicting kidnapper Raymond in all of his unsettling ordinariness. And that is the true genius of this film. Evil is everyday and banal, and could manifest within your neighbour, your co-worker, or that guy in front of you in the supermarket. Rex's determined fascination with finding out what happened to Saskia ultimately leads him to meet up with Raymond, who promises to reveal what happened to Saskia if Rex agrees to go through the same process. Rex, racked by his curiosity, agrees to drink a drugged coffee given to him by Raymond, after which he wakes up buried alive, doomed to his fate. The movie then ends with Raymond enjoying a relaxing day at home with his family, cementing the deeply disturbing duality of his normal life and the impossible evil lurking within.
Nightcrawler. You could generously call Nightcrawler's protagonist, Lou Bloom, a bit of a character, or more accurately, a flaming sociopath. Yeah, probably go with the latter. It doesn't take long for the film to confirm that Lou, an ambitious videographer who sells violent footage to local news stations, is a deeply, deeply bad dude. And if you were hoping that he might change his ways or at least get some well-earned comeuppance by film's end, well, you're all out of luck. Lou's increasingly nefarious acts, such as sabotaging the vehicles of rival stringers and recording the brutal aftermath, culminate in him engineering the death of his assistant Rick, and even filming his final moments because, well, why not? By film's end, Lou has managed to wriggle free of the police's investigations of his activity. And better still, he hires a pool of interns as his business continues to grow. His utter disregard for anyone not himself only further enriching him. Brazil. Terry Gilliam's dystopian masterpiece, Brazil, follows low-level civil servant Sam Lowry as he attempts to locate a woman from his dreams while facing off against a hyper-bureaucratic government. In the film's haunting ending, Sam is captured by the government and charged with treason, before being informed that his love interest Jill has been killed and he's due to be tortured imminently. Though Sam then appears to be rescued, it's eventually revealed that this is simply an imagined happy ending, and Sam is actually still in government captivity, having been lobotomized. Sam may, therefore, be blissfully happy in the film's final moments, but it's an undeniable victory for the oppressive government, who have once again exerted their will over a pesky challenger. As it so often does in life, the depressing status quo endures.
Hereditary. Ari Aster's incredible directorial debut is one of the most startling and unforgettable films of any genre from the last few years. A deliciously intense, nerve-shredding horror classic. The film revolves around Annie Graham, who begins to experience supernatural phenomena in her home following the death of her mother. Over the course of the film, it slowly becomes clear that her dear old mum wasn't quite who she appeared. She was in fact part of a coven, plotting to resurrect a demon by transferring his consciousness into that of a suitable male host. Over the course of the movie, Annie and her family are dismantled by the coven. Her daughter Millie is decapitated in a vehicular accident, her husband Steve is burned alive, and she herself ends up possessed, before slicing her own head off with a piece of piano wire. And that's not even the worst of it. Her son Peter, who drove the car that killed his sister, is emotionally brutalized during the film, weakening him enough that the demon can enter him in the final scene. Hereditary concludes with the demon inside Peter, a virile host with a fleet of endlessly loyal coven members ready to do his bidding. It is the very definition of evil prevailing, and absolutely haunting in every fibre of its being.
Speak No Evil. Speak No Evil is one sick puppy of a movie. Following Bjorn and Louise, a Danish couple who are invited to spend a weekend with Dutch couple Patrick and Karen at their country house. What begins as a mildly awkward weekend away as Danish and Dutch cultural sensibilities clash eventually gives way to abject horror when it's revealed that Patrick and Karen are serial killers, whose MO involves murdering parents, stealing their child, cutting the child's tongue out, using them to lure the next set of parents in, and then killing the previous child. Yep, that is one horrifying combination right there. If you expected the infuriatingly compliant Bjorn and Louise to grow a pair and fight back, bitter disappointment is in store, folks, as the story ends with the pair stripped naked and stoned to death by Patrick and Karen, who have also cut out the tongue of Bjorn and Louise's daughter and are now using her as their latest faux child. Kill list. Ben Wheatley's savage horror kill list revolves around two hitmen, Jay and Gal, as they carry out 3 hits for a mysterious new client. Their third and final target, however, leads them to a mansion where a cult's human sacrifice is taking place in the woods. The pair launch an assault on the various cult members, eventually resulting in Gal's death, after which Jay flees to his home, where the cultists are waiting and knock him out. When he wakes up, Jay is forced into a knife fight with a cloaked figure referred to as the Hunchback. And when Jay prevails, he realizes that the Hunchback was actually his wife, Shell, with their son strapped to her back. The applauding cultists have tricked Jay into killing his own family, and the film ends with them crowning him, the precise meaning of which is left eerily ambiguous as the end credits roll. All the same, there is nothing ambiguous here about the cult coming out on top. Evil once again earning an unsettling W. 12 Monkeys. Terry Gilliam strikes again with another expertly crafted, bleak vision of the future, in which a virus is released in 1996 and wipes out the vast majority of humanity, forcing the survivors to live underground. The great brilliance of 12 Monkeys is that the bad guys have already won when the movie begins, having nearly annihilated humanity. As such, when protagonist James Cole is sent back in time to try and track the origins of the virus, he's succinctly informed that the future cannot be changed. His mission is simply one to preserve what remains of the human race. And so, it's a foregone conclusion that Cole's death at the end of the movie, a sight he himself witnessed as a child, must happen in order for the scientist to learn that Dr. Peters was behind the virus, and maybe, just maybe, keep the dwindling human race in the future alive. Though there's a glimmer of hope for the scraps of humanity that remain, it's still an unchanging and inevitable victory for Peters.